see you've got your nice coat on, Fraulein. Members, the House is resumed. We are debating the third reading of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol, Extended Licensing Hours during Rugby World Cup Bill. When we broke for the dinner break, Jackie Dean was speaking. She has 9 minutes and 30 seconds remaining to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Jackie Dean.
When I started my contribution before the dinner hour, my opening comments were that this bill is not so much about the harms created by alcohol, and I'll go into that in a bit, but rather the ability for licensees to watch or to televise Rugby World Cup games of rugby outside their normal licensing hours. And the reason I talk about the opportunity to watch rugby on the television, live television, outside of licensing hours, is because throughout the consideration of this bill in the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, it has been brought to us that we need to be very precise about just what it is we are proposing to legislate for. So perhaps if I say what we are not legislating for is the ability for licensed premises to take advantage of the provisions in this Members' Bill, which will become part of the Principal Act, simply to extend their licensing hours for a bout of all-night drinking. This bill is not about that, and there are provisions in the bill to ensure that, for example, if a Rugby World Cup game commences more than 2 hours outside of the licensee's normal trading hours, then that premise has to close, and then it may reopen under the terms of this bill an hour before the scheduled game. So this is not about extended drinking opportunities. Rather, this is a bill which is about the opportunity for New Zealanders who are passionate about the All Blacks, and that's all of us, I think, having the opportunity to get together and celebrate whichever team they are supporting, whether it's Samoa or Namibia or South Africa or the mighty All Blacks, gives New Zealanders and everybody else the opportunity to watch in a social setting a game of rugby in a licensed premise. But if we look at the bill, helpfully at the back on Schedule 4, I believe, is a list of, and of course I can't find there it is, there is a list of all the games, and you will see, or one will see helpfully, that the games run from 1:30 in the morning right through to 9 o'clock. So the latest game that is scheduled is 9 o'clock in the morning, and I think it would be stretching it a bit to think that that is a recipe for all-night drinking, particularly under the provisions of this bill. However, I do acknowledge the concerns that have been expressed to this committee through submissions and also in this House, that there is harm associated with liquor licensing, and that really underpins the reasoning why, whilst this was a bill, Members' Bill, which was a standalone bill, it is now proposed to become an amendment to the Principal Act, which is the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act, with an expiry date, by the way, and there was one member in the House who didn't sit on the committee for terribly many times, but I do need to put on record that this bill does in fact expire. It is explicit in the bill and in the bill commentary that this is a bill which gives effect to licensees being able to trade outside their normal licensing hours for the purposes of televising live Rugby World Cup games, and we were very careful in the committee to be explicit about that point so that there would be no mistake. I want to turn my attention a little to the words televise, and of course these days many people will follow Rugby World Cup games on Twitter, on Facebook and other means, live streaming, but this bill, whilst not excluding that, is explicit in that this is a bill which is intended to enable licensed premises who have a large TV screen, which is available to most of the people in the bar, to televise that rugby game for the enjoyment of the people who choose to go and watch it. I was watching the telly in the break, as you do, as one does, and I saw one of the 7 o'clock, we call them news programs, loosely, which did a story on this bill and put up the proposition that it's perhaps not needed because we do have the ability to grant special licences, and yes, it's true, we do. We as in licensees. But there is the genesis of this bill, because what has been found is that district licensing committees can put very onerous conditions on special licences, which then have to be appealed, as this has happened many times, and can put onerous licensing conditions upon the applicant. What's the problem, you say? One says, because there's nothing wrong with onerous mitigating measures to mitigate the harm from alcohol. And so this is where the provisions of this Rugby World Cup licensing regime come in, because when notifying police or a district licensing committee that a licensee wishes to be open for the All Black Australia semi-final, within 7 days, that licensee has to provide the police and district licensing committee with a notice which sets out the measures they will take to reduce the harms associated with being open. And whilst that's not appealable, which is a little unusual in itself, it's not appealable, but there are also 3 bright line conditions which must also go with that notification, and that is no dumping bottles in dumpsters in early hours, no use of outside courtyard facilities, and no broadcast music loud nuisances. Furthermore, because this bill has been made an amendment to the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act for the duration for as long as it lasts, that enables section 259 of the Act to apply. And that section deals with variations in hours and transgressions against licensing conditions. And so there is protection, thank you Mr Speaker, there is protection for citizens, and there is the ability for the police and licensing inspectors to step in and act if there is a transgression. So I just wanted to be very clear about the provisions of this bill, stepping in where a gap is left with special licences. Whether this government and Parliament deals with special licensing in the future is a matter for another debate, but this bill fills that gap. This is the bill that is going to enable New Zealanders, such as myself, who only ever supports one team, to be able to go down to, and I started to say this before dinner, to go down to Fat Sally's on Thames Street in Oamaru as a guest of the North Otago Rugby Union, of which I'm a patron, and go and watch one of the games in the bar there, probably have something to drink, definitely have something to eat, and cheer my heart out as New Zealand and our mighty All Blacks go forward to win the Rugby World Cup. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.